Hi there, and welcome to the Reinvent Your Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Palco. Welcome to episode 2 of season 4, where we are in the midst of our health and history series here. So let me just start off this episode. I live in a town that has a lot of history to it. And I've asked people before, hey, have you heard of somebody by the name of Virginia Apgar? And people are usually like, I'm not sure. And then I ask people, oh, have you heard of the Watcher House? And they're like, oh yeah, is that right near you? From the Watcher series? Or, obviously everybody knows who Charles Adams is, who's also from the town of Westfield. So I wanted to make a point here that, we have Charles Adams, who was the cartoonist for The New Yorker, Addams Family. Obviously, a lot of people know what that is. They know what the Watcher House is, right? I've heard of all that kind of stuff. But when I ask them, oh, hey, Virginia Apgar, they're like, not sure. And then I tell them what Virginia Apgar did. And she grew up in Westfield, New Jersey. She's buried in Westfield. And, there is a tiny little park dedicated to Virginia Apgar, one of the first women who she basically changed how we newborns when they come out of the womb, when they're first born, changed how we standardized testing for them and really did a lot of historical things. But she's one of those women that she receives some credit, but a lot of people still don't know who she is. And that's what this podcast is going to be about today, is about, some of the most underrated, non-credited women in history, kind of the underdogs of our time. But anyway, Virginia Apgar does have a little park dedicated to her. And if you blink, you will actually miss it, okay? It is this little patch of grass that was donated by the local Girl Scouts, a little patch of grass with one lonely little wooden bench and maybe some flowers that's right next to the Krausers, okay? And it is so small that you would never know that it's like a memorial park. And this is the dedication for this woman who basically changed part of history. So we're going to talk about Virginia first. It's like, what about Virginia? You have Charles Adams. There's a whole festival dedicated to him around Halloween time, and murals painted under the train station, under the bridges and things like that. And I'm like, poor Virginia's rolling in her grave, okay? So we're going to talk about underrated women, non-credited women today. I think it's important. The trailblazers, change makers that did a lot of really, really neat stuff, really cool stuff that changed history in a sort of way that don't get credit. Because, hey, let's face it, women have been getting the shaft for all throughout history, right? They've been getting the shaft. So anyway, let's talk about Virginia Apgar, number 1, okay? So Virginia Apgar, she was born in the early 1900s in Westfield, died in 1974. Like I said, she's still buried here. And she was an American physician. She was an anesthesiologist and researcher. So she invented something called the Apgar score. If you're not familiar with the Apgar score and you have children, you have witnessed the Apgar score in process. Okay, so basically the Apgar score is a way to assess the health of a newborn baby right after birth. It was the very first standardized way of assessing a newborn, okay? And they assess things like heart rate, respiratory effort, muscle tone, reflex response, and color. So before Virginia, there wasn't a way to really standardize how healthy a baby was right after birth, which is the most kind of critical moment. But Virginia, she did this, and she actually, where is it? She first wrote the formulation down on a napkin, I read, and she presented it in 1952, and then it was actually published in 1953, and it's been used ever since in hospitals everywhere. Okay. So she was the youngest of three children. Helen and Charles Apgar came from a very, very musical family. As a child, she played the violin, so a very musical household. She was the first woman at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons to be named a full professor. So that's a big deal. That was a big deal. She was determined to be a doctor by the time she exited high school, pretty much. And it was at the beginning of the Great Depression where she entered the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia University, graduated fourth in her class in 1933. And she was going to pursue becoming a surgeon, but then decided to go into the field of anesthesiology, which wasn't popular at the time. It wasn't really recognized as a specialty. It wasn't respected by other surgeons as kind of an equal field, but she chose to kind of delve into it because it was a field that still needed a lot of study and research, and made a lot of innovations there. So so that was pretty cool. And let's see, she returned to Columbia University, was the director of the Division of Anesthesiology and an attending anesthesiologist. It was eventually recognized as a specialty and valued. So, it became a specialty, and it was well acknowledged, had its, own academic department. And she was the first woman to be a full professor for that department. So she later, really studied the effects of anesthesiology, especially on mothers giving birth, and did a lot of innovation, research, and studies into that aspect of it. So, it's pretty, she did a lot of stuff. She earned a master's in public health from Johns Hopkins. Devoted her career basically to the prevention of birth defects through public education and fundraising. So good old Virginia doesn't get credit for all she's done. She has received numerous honors and awards for her work. Became director of the Division of Congenital Defects at the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, now the March of Dimes. Okay, so she did eventually get recognition, but a lot of people still don't know who she is. And so she did a lot of stuff. One of her famous sayings was, nobody is going to stop breathing on me. She saved 16 lives because she always carried a pocket knife and rubber tubing on her in the event that someone needed emergency airways. So she was definitely a woman who was dedicated to other people and research and other people's lives. And she said, birth is the most hazardous time of life. It's urgently important to evaluate quickly the status of a just born baby and to identify immediately those who need emergency care. So she was really dedicated to that. So in other words, Virginia's got your back. Okay. Some Virginia Apgar fun facts for you. She played on 7 sports teams. She flew planes, apparently, made stringed instruments. Like I said, she was a violinist, cellist, all kinds of stuff. Fly fished. She has her own stamp postage, which is cool. When asked why she never married, and I love this, she said, "It's just that I haven't found a man who can cook." How cool is that? How funny is that? I love that. She was the first woman to earn the Alumni Gold Medal for Distinguished Achievement in Medicine from the College of Physicians, Surgeons, Columbia University. Chosen as Woman of the Year in Science and Research by Ladies' Home Journal. So she was a true pioneer of her time. She did a bunch of other stuff. And, at the time, it was rare for women in the field, especially the medical field, to be recognized to do this kind of stuff. So she, another quote, and I'll kind of end it on this one. "It's a shame that women have to be so much better at things than men to be recognized by society. No doubt in your daughter's time, this sort of prejudice will start to disappear. But when I was on the way up, and for people like you who are now on the front lines, the society of today, especially the medical profession, is very tough. Avoid looking back and you will achieve much. So she said that to one of her students or something like that. So she taught. She was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1995. She accomplished more and improved the health of babies, unborn and mothers than anyone in the 20th century, pretty much. And, studying birth defects and all that kind of stuff. So Virginia Apgar, man, I mean, if you didn't know who she was, now you know. Inventor of the Apgar score, which is a standardized test for every newborn that comes out of the womb. And thank you, Virginia, for your contribution to society. It's a big deal. When women don't get recognized throughout history, we have to re-recognize them so people know who they are. It's a big deal. And Virginia Apgar Park, I'm still, it's, you blink and you miss it, but that's the thanks we give women, I guess. But all right, number 2. Okay. And I'm going to focus on 4 women today that I thought were pretty profound, pretty, pioneers in their day and, didn't get the credit that was due to them necessarily. They got some recognition, but people still don't know who they are, So number 2 is Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Have you ever heard of Sister Rosetta Tharpe? She's basically the godmother of rock and roll. So she was like, the where rock and roll came from, man. And you probably didn't know this, okay? She was an American singer, songwriter, and guitarist, popular in the 1930s and 1940s. She was referred to as the original soul sister. And like I said, the godmother of rock and roll. And Sister Rosetta Tharpe was interesting because she mixed kind of spiritual gospel music, lyrics with the electric guitar. So she did a lot of innovation, a lot of experimentation, and was amongst the first gospel musician to kind of mix rhythm, blues, jazz, rock and roll, everything all together. And she was said to inspire a lot of rock and roll musicians who came after her: Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, even Eric Clapton. So she, the other interesting thing about her is that she was Black. She was also a queer woman, so she was bisexual, and she was open with that in her musical community, but not necessarily in the public, because obviously at that time, that's like a lot of stones against her, right? But anyway, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, at 6 years old, she performed with her mother in a traveling I can't say it, evangelical, oh my God, troupe. Okay, so she was a musical prodigy, basically, and a Black female guitarist, when she was very young. It was very, very rare, okay? But she was a pioneer in technique and sound, and one of the first to use distortion on the electric guitar, which wasn't used, and then mix that with gospel and even pop, and she basically crossed a lot of lines. Okay, so it says she performed her spiritual light music in dark nightclubs. So pretty cool and controversial among conservative religious groups. And especially, being queer and Black, a lot of things against her in that aspect. But yeah, she started playing guitar at 4 years old. And, she had achieved 4 Grammys, a Hollywood star, so she did get some recognition, but a lot of people probably never heard of her. She was born in Arkansas, came from a religious family, singers, cotton pickers, evangelists. Okay. And so she mixed gospel, jazz, blues. It was rare to have females on an electric guitar. So she had collaborated with Duke Ellington, Dixie Hummingbirds. In 1941, she traveled with a swing band, and eventually she teamed up with an all-white male group. Okay, so she, racism was still rampant at that time. So while on tour, she slept in buses. She had to go to the back of restaurants to pick up food. So there was still a bit of segregation. So if you think about it, she was really a pioneer. She was really kind of out of her element and not afraid to experiment with sound and mixing all these different types of music. And it was really cool. She basically started rock and roll and gets no credit. So, she spent later part of her life touring in Europe, stuff like that. And this is interesting, when she was compared to male guitarists in her time, she'd say, "Can't no man play like me. I play better than a man." I love that. Okay. I love that. But yeah, she in the late 40s, she and her girlfriend, I guess it is, Marie Knight, they actually played together and toured together, and they filled stadiums and stuff like that. The pair eventually split in the 1950s. So yeah, that's sister, good stuff. She's our sister Rosetta Tharpe. So if you don't know about her, then check her out. All right. Next one I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to bring up just a quote that I want to read to you after I talk about her a little bit. Let's see if I get it here. Yep, there we go. All right. So number 3, underrated women in history, by the name of Marie-Louise von Franz. And I don't know if I'm butchering her name. I might be. But basically, she was a Swiss psychologist and also a very close colleague of Carl Jung. If you know who Carl Jung is, talks about archetypes a lot, did a lot of work. But yeah, they worked together for over 30 years. She earned her doctorate at University of Zurich. And from 1934, she worked closely with Carl Jung until his death in 1961, and specifically studies on alchemy, dreams, synchronicity, things like that. And in 1974, she and some others founded the Foundation of Jungian Psychology. So she's interesting because she studied fairy tales, believe it or not, the psychology in fairy tales. And I thought that was really, really cool. So she, let's see, she was asked to help a German researcher write about this topic, fairy tales, okay? And this then resulted in her spending the next 9 years of intense research into this. Basically the connection between these fairy tale stories and psychology. And she began developing theories on this, such as Brothers Grimm fairy tales relating the Carl Jung archetypes. She saw fairy tales as images of different phases of experiencing reality of the soul, felt that fairy tales are the purest and simplest expression of collective unconscious psych processes, representing the archetypes in their simplest, rarest, and most concise form, because they are less, they're less than with conscious material than myths and legends. So fairy tales basically was a good way of determining, proving that humans share a collective unconscious of archetypes reflecting human aspirations, feelings, fears, and frustration. So she was the queen of Jungian psychology, studied the, inner workings of the self, and really did a lot of good for this in the study of psychology and really delving into people's psyches, and it was really cool. She published more than 20 books, some of which the interpretation of fairy tales, shadows, and evil in fairy tales, the feminine in fairy tales, alchemy, an intro to symbolism and psychology. And she did stuff on synchronicity and things like that. Just a quote from her that I want to read. So what I was bringing up. So one of Marie's quotes: "Following your own star means isolation, not knowing where to go, having to find out a completely new way for yourself instead of just going on the trodden path everybody else runs along. That's why there's always been a tendency in humans to project the uniqueness and the greatness of their own inner self onto outer personalities and become the servants, the devoted servants, admirers, and imitators of outer personalities. It is much easier to admire a great personality and become a pupil or follower of a guru or a religious prophet or an admirer of a big official personality, for example, President of the United States, or live your life for some military general whom you admire. That is much easier than following your own star. So I think that's a really profound thing she's talking about there, how we take on these certain archetypes and kind of live out our lives as certain archetypes or characters that we play in kind of the movie of life, right? And some of us just put on masks and play in these character roles and never get to the core of who we really are. Follow our own star, like she said, follow our own true path in life and be truly authentic. So she was well before her time and studying this stuff, and it's really awesome to read about her. So so that's that. And last but not least, we're going to go with number 4. We're going to talk a little bit about dinosaurs and fossils. Who could this be? None other than Mary Anning, Anning. So she is another forgotten change maker, and born 1799, died 1847. So this is going back a little ways, but she was an English fossil collector, dealer, and paleontologist. So I think we forget about dinosaurs. Because the human part of us and our ego is like, we're so special, blah, blah, blah. But you guys forget about that, like, we had these creatures before us that lived on this planet before us that we often don't talk about. So Marie Anning made some of the most significant fossil finds of the 19th century. Basically contributed to our understanding of prehistoric life as we know it. What came or who came before us. She was excluded, of course, from the scientific world. No surprise there because of her gender. So she often didn't receive full credit on a lot of her findings. And the men took the credit, okay? She was born to a poor family, so she didn't have a formal education, but she happened to live in an area that was rich in animal fossils. So her dad actually taught her how to find and clean fossils along the beach. So that was pretty cool. And at age 12, 1811, Mary and her brother found a skull which was the very first ichthyosaur or ichthyosaurus. She later found more, but that was an amazing finding for a 12-year-old. I mean, how cool is that? And then 12 years later, she discovered a complete and first skeleton of the first plesiosaurus, which is some kind of fish dragon-like looking reptile thing with a broad body and short tail. And at first, people didn't take it seriously or think that it was legit. And then they found out, hey, this is legit what she found. It's genuine and it's real. So she was often not given credit for her findings, yet she found a lot. And, her findings helped tremendously just understand our history, okay? So she was excluded from joining the Geological Society of London. She didn't receive credit for some of her findings that were published. Her name was left off of it. So all that good stuff that women had to put up with over the years. She did have one scientific writing published of hers in a magazine of natural history in 1839, which she was basically questioning an editor's claims in it. So she had an interesting life too. Not an easy life, it sounds like. Her family was poor. Parents had 10 children. Whew. And a number of the children died. 2 during infancy. And this is, reflective of the time period. 2 died during infancy, and 1 after the child's clothes caught on fire from adding wood to the fire. And I guess she burned to death. That was just horrible. But basically only Mary and her brother Joseph, who was 3 years older, were the only ones to survive to adulthood. Crazy, right? Out of 10 children. And here's an interesting story that was kind of like lore of the day. When Mary was only 15 months old, a neighbor named Elizabeth Haskins and 2 other women were standing under an elm tree. They were watching an equestrian show, and lightning struck and killed the 3 women, including the one that was holding little Mary. So people nearby, they quickly rushed Mary home. She was rinsed in a bath of water, hot bath of water, and doctors said it was a miracle that she survived this. And her family said that she had always been a sickly baby before that happened, and afterwards she just blossomed. And they attributed this to why she was so brilliant and curious and intelligent and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was an interesting little tale. And man, the stories that, history can tell you from these families and stuff. But yeah, the family was often discriminated against for not following the Church of England. And at the time, anyone who wasn't following the teachings of the Church of England were excluded from many things, like taking positions in the army, other professions, or not being able to study at Oxford or Cambridge. The father did die at 44 from complications from an injury he sustained from a fall off a cliff, because it was dangerous work. Fossil finding, you often had to be in really treacherous weather on cliffs. And so it was a very dangerous atmosphere collecting fossils. But he died from that, and also TB. But the family continued collecting and selling fossils. Her mother, Molly, initially ran the business, and Mary eventually took it over. And at 27, Mary actually saved enough money and purchased a house with a storefront window for her shop, Anning's Fossil Depot. And Mary died from breast cancer, unfortunately, at 47 years old in 1847. And one more fun fact. Did you know that it's been said that the inspirational basis for the popular tongue twister, "She sells seashells on the seashore," was inspired after Mary Anning. Some people said it wasn't, but a lot of people said it was, that she inspired them. And then the other great thing I discovered was that she's also the focus and the main character in one of my all-time favorite movies, Ammonite, with Kate Winslet. If you haven't seen that movie, Ammonite, so good. Highly recommend it. But yeah, Mary Anning. So those are 4 women in history that were change makers, trailblazers, that didn't receive credit because of the time period, either because of their, obviously, their gender, sexual orientation, their race, that kind of thing. And, women throughout history have really had to kind of step it up to receive equal rights or get credit for things that credits were stolen from them, or to even get a little park bench or something like that. But a lot of these women, they have been recognized throughout history. It's just that a lot of people still don't know who they are. So that just kind of shows that even though we recognize certain women, they still don't get the same recognition than maybe a man or other people in history, maybe pop culture or the Watcher House, that's more popular. But I think we can learn a lot from history and what these women had to go through, the ordeals they had to go through, just when everything was against them, just them pursuing a passion, okay, them pursuing a field that was rare or new, or, where they were discouraged against it. It just shows the strength of these women, and how when you really have a passion for something, you should just go for it, okay? Because you're going to be met with a lot of resistance in life. You're going to be met with a lot of people who tell you that you can't, or that, because you're at that time, it was like, because you're a woman, you can't vote, you can't even join this society, you can't attend our meetings, we can't put your name on this research. But the women are like, I'm going to do it anyway, even if I don't get credit. So you may not always get credit for the things that you do in life. You may not always get the recognition and the acknowledgement that you seek in life, but you should still do it. You should still go for it. Not for recognition, not for acknowledgement, but because you could be a trailblazer, you could be a change maker, you can really impact somebody's life or impact the way that we understand things in the world, right? And maybe you will get recognition later on, but that's not the point. So stand in your own light, stand in your own truth. If you have a passion for something and there's distraction around you, go for it anyway. Go for it anyway. That's all I have to say. And that's kind of the point of this whole spiel. All right. So there you have it. Those are 4 women who made history, maybe are little underdogs of history, underrated. There are many, many more, but I decided I'm focused on these 4 that I thought were interesting, kind of all different fields. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm really happy. I love doing them. Let me know if you guys have any other ideas or anything you want me to talk about, and I will bring it to mind. But yeah, I'm going to do one more episode in this series on health and history, and then we'll move on to something else. But thank you for listening. If you want to check out more of my podcasts, they're on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Reinvent Your Reality Podcast. They're on YouTube. Okay. Check out my YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't done so. I do put out weekly videos. So it's youtube.com/JenPauco. And my website is jenpauco.com and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you for listening. And until next time, have a great day.